Matthews. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Frankfurt School of Finance and Management in Germany. And my role is, of course, the marketing, the student recruitment and admissions, but also a lot of involvement with product development, so discussion about what products would be most suitable and how should we innovate for the future market. Zoom University, and the first point is, of course, Zoom. We're talking about all of the digital tools that are being introduced now. So whether it's Zoom or Microsoft Teams is also very commonly used. This for me, and actually for Frankfurt School, this is about the integration of technology into a learning experience. It's not exclusively about making a degree program an online program. That's not the full intention there. The question is really, how can we involve technology in a degree program or in a study experience where the value of on-campus and face-to-face teaching and interaction is maximized. If somebody makes the effort to come to our building to meet with their classmates and the professors, you want that to be the most valuable moment. So if there's a type of or a style of education, an element of the learning experience that could be delivered through online technology, whether it's synchronous or asynchronous, so live or not live teaching, then it makes sense to be efficient with people's time, to offer that through online engagement. And that's where a tool like Zoom came in very useful in the last year. The reason, yes, it's no secret, we've just been through more than a year's worth of contact restrictions due to the pandemic. And this has forced not just universities, and this forced everyone from schools, primary and secondary schools through to industry. It's forced everyone to look at alternative methods of interacting. And for the university sphere, this was a question, okay, most universities have experimented with some form of online tuition, but some more than others. Some were very half-hearted. There was always a question, is it our thing? Is it not our thing? Is our university a bricks and mortar? And does it have a fixed campus theory, like a setup, or are we leaning towards online? And then what happened, the pandemic comes along, and whether we liked it or not, we all got shoved into the digital sphere and had to say, okay, now we either sink or swim. And that's what happened. Some universities really shut down for a year. They had very little interaction, no services. They basically went to just webinars, and others invested heavily in a really good digital experience. Frankfurt School is one of those universities, and I would count most of the top business schools. Many of our peers had already started looking at blended learning. The idea, as I mentioned at the beginning, was that we have different modes of study, different types of materials can be delivered online and on campus. And so many schools, we were investing in technology. We were investing in classrooms which were digitally enabled for both on-site and off-site participants. You have a wall of, the obvious one is a wall of students where you see, okay, those are all the online students, their faces are on the wall, they can raise their hand, they can engage also with the people in the classroom, and you essentially have this hybrid room. But that was always like a sideline experience. It wasn't the mainstream education. Most programs were fully on campus, face-to-face, and then shared working collaboration tools like Canvas, a good example. There's many similar tools where materials are shared, but you don't have the video, the face-to-face element. That was always restricted to the classroom. So for Frankfurt School, we'd invested in some of this technology. We were experimenting with online. We have a fully online master's, so that was a very nice area for us to experiment with. but our mainstream education was always face-to-face in the classroom. And so when the lockdown turned up in March 2020, I think like pretty much every other institution and company, we all assumed that this is going to be maybe 2 months, maybe 3, but by summer we're all good again. We just have to see through the initial wave, and there wasn't a sizable investment. There was no significant change across the industry, and we were the same. The first couple of weeks we had to entirely close our building. Everyone went home, staff, students, everything's off. And then after 2 weeks, the staff were allowed back to the campus. And then we just said, okay, now we just have to figure out how we deliver the rest of the semester through online sessions. And that was where Zoom suddenly appeared, and this brand new company no one has heard of. Its share price rockets. It's household name suddenly. But we didn't significantly invest right at the beginning in new technology. And it was when we realized that after a couple of months, this might not go away. We could be facing this all through the summer semester. And that was when we said, okay, we need to change gears. We cannot take the risk of being a waiter. We can't sit back and wait. What if our students can't come back until September? So our planning actually was, we have to see ourselves through to September. And anyway, this is actually a very nice push that fits with our blended and digital strategy. We invest now. We invest in multiple digital classrooms. We essentially turned all of our main lecture theatres into digital hybrid classrooms. We invested in the camera equipment, the extra widescreen monitors to enable hybrid students to take part. But the assumption was always, in September, most students will be back. And that was actually quite a learning experience, because then by the end of August, new semester's coming up, and we realized that we're not going back to normal. It was such a relief to say that, yeah, but at least we've got every classroom now enabled for hybrid. And we could give students a choice, and we did. We had no capacity constraints because we had enough space, and we had really altered the size of rooms and the ability to have say half the people in the room, the other half were online, and there was still sufficient space for social distancing. So nobody was forced to study online, and this was a really big sales advantage as well. To tell people, yes, we don't know when the crisis is going to end, but you have a choice. You can be on campus if you're in the right country. If you're happy to come on campus for your classes, we've provided the setup. And if for personal health or just travel restriction reasons, you need to go online, we've got that option too. And we went straight into it. And then from September onwards, that was our real learning experience. This was where we said, this is now our mainstream model, blended delivery of education, where students have a choice of how and when and where they consume their content and their interaction. And that we had a very steep learning curve. Now we've got thousands of students studying hybrid and blended. All sorts of little technical things that we didn't expect came up. Problems with people who didn't have the right Wi-Fi, the right internet speed. Were all of our faculty capable of dealing with the new technologies involved? Did they even understand how the settings on their own laptop work? All sorts of little things, and even learning experiences like, if the professor is the one who's running the presentation off his laptop at the front of class, and it's just basically a glorified webcam that he's using, you've got everything on a single machine, and that is complicated. Something always goes wrong. So then the investment in, okay, we need a Zoom room setup. The room itself is the host, the professor is someone joining and makes a presentation, and then the interaction flows a lot better. And it also enabled us to have essentially background staff who manage the online student experience. So yeah, I mean, that's just one example, but there were many little learning experiences that helped us then improve over the autumn, through the winter, to say, we really ironing out a lot of the problems and improving our equipment as well. Okay, so the microphones were an issue in the classroom. You have to take the dial and say, we need multiple microphones around the classroom so people engaged in conversation, whether it's just someone having a joke and engaging with the lecturer, or if it's valuable questions, both need to be heard and experienced by the online group. So this required investment in good microphones across many rooms. That was dozens and dozens of high quality mics got installed. Not a small amount of money, but it's one of these little things that just improves the experience and the feeling you're actually engaging online and on-campus students. Some will, yes. Some universities have literally just been shut for a year and are desperately waiting to go back on campus. And I wouldn't judge and say they've made a mistake. I understand that some universities, especially large state universities, simply don't have the resources and the ability to affect such a wholesale change of technology and equipment in classrooms. The UK maybe is better set up because they have a different funding model now, but German universities are still free in the state system, and they just don't have the ability to change quickly in wholesale. So yes, I would understand if there are universities who say, okay, we can do some online, maybe study groups, maybe coaching, but lectures are lectures and they're done in the classroom. That might happen. But on the other end of the scale, I think certainly somewhere like Frankfurt School, where we are a smaller specialized university, we're a business school, and we're very focused on the experience and demands of our students, we made the change and it's here to stay. And I think you'll see that across the business school community. The top tier schools have invested, they've changed, the experience has changed, even the training of our faculty is evolving so that they deliver a better online, hybrid and on-campus experience. For the students, I think there's a certain amount of skepticism when they hear blended. There can be a leaning towards, does that mean you're trying to save money by just delivering our content online? So there's a healthy amount of skepticism there that what they're being offered is value for money. But when universities do get it right, when they say, for example, you've got a case study workshop. This lecture is heavily case study and group based. It can be done. We've done it on Zoom, where we organize all of the breakout rooms and people go into their groups. But it is always going to feel better to be physically there with your case study group, especially if you're locked in a room with them for 5 to 10 hours, really working through an intensive project. Face-to-face is just more productive and you can keep each other going. And it's harder for someone to hide and just let the group carry them through, which does happen in the online environments. On the other hand, we also have a lot of partners. So if a student is studying, say, our Master of Finance, and they say, yes, but I really want this specialized content, and you can literally dip into a partner network and say, oh, they've got a class you can go to online. We've just seen an explosion in opportunities of what you could study. You don't have to travel to Australia to take one very specialized module in whichever area of finance you wanted to do. You can simply join remotely and assume that many of our partner universities have got the capability of delivering online or hybrid content. So yeah, we had a lot of students who had mandatory overseas experience as part of their studies, and because we were all in the same boat, all of our partner universities were teaching online. So not great. Of course, the students wanted their semester in Australia or Spain or the US, but they still got the content and the experience from a different university that we couldn't have delivered. So that actually is a nice advantage that's here to stay, is shared content and a far wider range of materials they could learn. This is a very tricky subject, and this has been asked across universities, both by the universities themselves and the students, for months now. The assumption that online education should be at a lower price point. If you look at fully online providers, they have in the past tended to pitch their product at a lower cost because the incremental cost of each new student is very low. And there's no obvious limit. I mean, especially if you have recorded content and a digital experience, it doesn't matter if it's 100 or 1,000 students. At a certain point, your cost base doesn't keep increasing, and that's why it's priced lower. If we're looking at hybrid, where there's a lot of live content and still class sizes are limited, I understand why a student would say, yes, but I know it's the same person teaching at the same university and all of that. However, the value of business school is also the networking ability of being there, the experience, many sideline benefits of engagement that I'm just not getting online, therefore it's not worth as much money. And I totally understand that, but I also understand the university will say, yes, but our staff costs are the same or higher because we now need additional technical support. The hardware costs have just increased, and we also have to rewrite a lot of content, so development costs of the products has just increased. It's very difficult to even maintain the same cost base in many cases. The cost of the program has just gone up. But you can't pass that on to the students at the same time. So I think the answer is somewhere in the middle, that students need to be given the choice, that they could have been on campus, but they don't, just because they went online, that's not, I can have it at a discount now. That was a choice, and it's a convenience, and it's about access to the education. But then at the same time, the burden on the universities is, if you're going to ask for the same amount of money for an online student, you have to make sure that your technology and the experience is really catered and designed for them as much as for the on-campus students. How are you going to make up the experience gap between the two groups so that an online student says, I had such a great experience, I have so many new contacts, really a great engagement level, I don't feel that I lost out by going online. It was different, but it wasn't worse. That is the point we have to reach. And only then can you honestly stand in front of a group of students and say, that's why the price is the same online and offline. You had a choice and the experience is equivalent but not the same. And it's that question of synchronous versus asynchronous education. These are terms that have become actually very commonly used now. The idea of basically, is it recorded or is it live? And traditional online products, then there's still a lot like this, where you have education on demand. I want module 1 in finance, and I book it. I can see there's 10 different modules. I watch it at my own speed. The professor there stands there and talks for 10 minutes with his slide deck. You do some mini tests, and at the end of the section, you complete a larger test to make sure the knowledge is in. And there are lots of everything from language learning apps through to online platforms like Coursera, where there's all of this pre-recorded and developed content, and that has a value, but that is different from being able to actually ask that professor a question and to engage and talk through live examples and work with your class. These are two different styles of education, and that's really the gap between online learning and blended learning.